it leads you to only one unique date, 5561 BCE, and no other. No ifs, no buts. If you look at the Valmiki Ramayana reference, there are close to, this was surprise to me, there are close to 600 astronomy descriptions. Again, the same method, same methodology. Thank you. If you put together or try to solve it as a crossword puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, it takes you to 12,209 BCE as the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha, like about 14,000 years. Now these are our two Itihasa texts. But that is not to say we cannot go beyond that. But the information is not as detailed as we have in Mahabharata or Ramayana. So just I'm going to use the mnemonics and say about more than 7,000 years ago Mahabharata, more than 14,000 years ago Ramayana. And if those of you who are familiar or read it, both of them mention Rigveda. Both of them mention all four Vedas, by the way. Okay, now some of you might be under the misconception. I'm saying this because I was, that I thought only three Vedas are mentioned in Mahabharata and Ramayana. That's not true. All four Vedas are mentioned, but that's besides the point. Now, if you look at the Saraswati references in the Rigveda, especially, what you can tell based on the geology, geophysics, geochemistry, hydrodynamics, oceanography data, that definitely some of the ruchas, some of the suktas in Rigveda are definitely more than 21,000 years. Okay, so you know where I'm going with this, the mnemonics of 7,000. So let's go back. So more than 7,000 years ago Mahabharata, more than 14,000 years ago Ramayana, definitely more than 21,000 years ago Rigveda. Now, you know the multiplication of 7, everyone? Okay, so what's the next number going back?
28.
28,000. You can actually look at our current nakshatra system, the nakshatra system with 27 nakshatra or 28 nakshatra. And you look at the references in many of the Brahmana Grantha, but also Mahabharata, like, importance given to Kritika, for example, and also Vishaka, in Vanaparva, for example, and you can tell that the current nakshatra system that we are dealing with, current nakshatra system as is, was established about 28,000 years ago. Now I'm using mnemonics, so it's not exact 28,000, it could be plus minus sometime. What's the next number?
35.
35, very good, thank you. Now, if you go to Maitrayani Aranyak, there is a story of Ikshwaku king Brihadrat, and three things are mentioned. Very important, pay attention. It says a bright pole star is moving from its location, number one. It says the spring equinox is in the Magha Nakshatra. And the third thing, very important, it says the oceans are drying. Now, when does spring equinox occur in Magha Nakshatra? Not today. If you go backward, the first time it happens is about 8,000 BC, so like 10,000 years ago. So that could be potentially time of Brihadrat, but there is one problem, big problem. Because in 8,000 BC, the oceans are not drying. Because last 20,000 years, since called LGM, last glacial maximum, they are coming up. Like someone here said, this ice age, 10,000 BC, that's not true. Ice age ended around 20,000 years ago. Okay, just a minor point. Okay. So if you look at now another cycle, the cycle of precession, so 8,000 BC is not the answer. So if you go back 26,000 years, you find all three coming together. Okay, the spring equinox in Magha Nakshatra, the oceans are drying, and a bright pole star that is shifting is actually the Brahma Rashi, Abhijit or Vega in the northern hemisphere, and Canopus or Sage Agastya star in the southern hemisphere. What's the next number? 42. Enormous geological evidence tells us that this is the time Yamuna, separation of Yamuna from Ganga was completed. Sorry, forgive me. Separation of Yamuna from Saraswati was completed, and now Yamuna was meeting Ganga. Next one is 49,000. That is when more or less the separation of Yamuna from Saraswati began. So I'm just giving you both the celestial but the geological changes. What's the next one? 56,000. This is one I don't have exactly what happened, but if you look at the genetic papers, you can look for Monica Carmi in 2015. There is a significant genetic male chromosomes bottleneck, very similar to what I have shown for Mahabharata in 7,500 years ago. But it's not very clear what it is. It could be, for example, the Sagara, what is you call the Dasharatnya war, we don't know for sure. Or it could be Parshurama Sharma getting rid of miscreants 21 times. So this is speculative. We just don't know exactly what it is. What's the next one? About 62,000, 63,000, something like this. This is possibly, again speculative, time of a Swayambhu Manu. Again we have the Uttanapad, for example. Surya Vamshi, again Ikshvaku dynasty. And we have a reference to again bright pole stars in the Puranas. And that's possibly that time. And quickly the last one, the 70,000 years. Anyone knows something grand happening 70,000 years ago? Toba explosion, there you go. And what do we see? We see in different places in India and even outside, a layer referring to that 72,000 BC. And there are stone tools below that layer, there are stone tools above that layer. So there were people before and there were people after. That's not to say immediately we can connect something from Rigveda or anything like this. But quickly, and you remind me what time. Now, as soon as I say this, somebody will say, oh, that's great, I didn't know that. Okay, and if you take it on the Shraddha, the life is fine. But we also need a Samshay. And we also need a Jidnyasa. Now, if you don't have a Jidnyasa, then you are stuck with the Shraddha. And if you decide to go with the Samshay, then basically Krishna says, Adnishcha Shraddha Dhanasya Samshayatma Vinashyati. Okay? It leads to complete destruction. But just I want to say there is a hope. For example, the way I understood this is called in Nyaya Darshana Swarthanuma. This is for my own understanding. But now if I have to explain it to someone, like I'm trying to explain it to you, then there is a concept of Pararthanuman. Okay, so which means I understood it, I am convinced, but how do I convince others? I'll tell you, there is a method. Nyaya Darshana talks about Pancha Avayava. But that is, see, if I explain, I have done my job. It's not my responsibility to make sure that everyone in the audience or whoever is listening understands. They may not understand. And can you tell me why? Some people will understand, others will understand yes and no, and others will completely not understand, and many will misunderstand.